Hello, everyone, and welcome to another video on the Holy Moley Studios channel. I'm Holy Moley Van. I'm joined with Holy Moley Davis. Today, we're trying to engage in some proper Star Wars fun in hopes of celebrating Star Wars Day with everyone. So for today, we're going to be discussing the comic Blood Ties, Boba Fett is dead. So just to get started, the reason we picked this is because it is what I found at a local comic book shop. We knew we wanted to talk about something Star Wars. I knew I wanted to talk about something Dark Horse. I have a long love for Dark Horse Star Wars. And this is what I found, and I hadn't checked it out before. And so I thought, let's give it a shot. Davis was able to find it digitally and read it, and so we could both kind of get caught up on it. But I do want to share something really quick. One of the reasons I was gravitated towards this is obviously because of the big Boba Fett is dead letters. And it reminded me that when I was in school, when I was in college doing my going through my art program, I was in a printmaking class. And as one of our final projects, we had to create a zine, which is very fitting to where we are now. But the one I created was Boba Fett themed. It's funny because now looking at it, I remember I was really busy at the time and I just kind of had to do what I could. And looking back at it, it's not as cool looking as I remember it, but I'm still happy with how it turned out. But I created the zine. I know everything's going to be kind of flipped, but it says, "I'm here to kill Boba Fett." And the concept is it's a bunch of pop culture characters. We had to make enough of these for the entire class. So this is just a copy I ended up with, but I did a different color scheme for every entry. So the interior, everything is the same, the colors are different for every person that got one. But of course we have sort of just a cadre of characters. I don't want to go through each of them to take up too much time. But yeah, all these characters just essentially say, "I'm here to kill Boba Fett." But as part of the project, what we had to do is we had to make the zine, and it had to have two functions. There had to be a printmaking element on each page, and there had to be a poster on the back when you unfold it. So I created this image.
Oh, nice.
And you can't see it because of the glare, but underneath in very small letters, it says Boba Fett is dead.
That rules.
And so like just seeing that in the store, I was reminded of this, and I just wanted to share that little connection.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Yeah, I've always loved it. You don't really see it happening a lot these days, but in certain nerd corners of the world, you would see like really fun images of like Boba Fett standing amongst the trophies of all these enemies. It would have stuff like the xenomorph skull would be there, or like there would be pictures of like a predator Yautja fighting Boba Fett. And I've always liked the idea of Boba Fett being sort of this cross-dimensional hunter that just fights all the big bads of every other universe. So that's why I gravitated towards this, and Davis was nice enough to go along with me. So sorry for the long intro, but I thought that was some important context for why we picked this issue, or this trade particularly. Kind of just jumping in, Davis, do you have any initial thoughts or feelings when you picked this up and read it for the first time?
I was pretty surprised by the art style, which, yeah, honestly took a little getting used to. I felt like as it went on, it improved. Like later issues look better than the first issue. But yeah, we'll throw some images up. I have kind of a love-hate relationship. Maybe not love-hate. I have kind of a complicated relationship to comics that kind of try to go for this like painterly realism.
Mm-hmm.
So much of what I love about comic book art is the just like the graphic, like traditional cartooning or variations of that. So I think there's room for people to do these different kinds of approaches, but I don't know if I loved it in this one. There are a few panels that are particularly rough, but again, like as it goes on, it gets better, I think. I don't know. What do you think?
I felt the same way. I think the art is really jarring. I think it's really indicative of the era it came out in. I guess I should have prefaced this by saying the creative team for this is The author is Tom Taylor, who I don't know if I've specifically read stuff from him, but I know his name pops up in Modernity and like a lot of Marvel projects and stuff. He does a lot of event stuff. And the infamous art that we're talking about is created by Chris Scalf. And this is published by Dark Horse in 2012. So I think it is really indicative of that era. Obviously, like Photoshop has been around since like the 90s, presumably, or some iterations of it have been around since the 90s, early 2000s. And this kind of has that written all over it. But I agree. I don't really necessarily ever like a photorealistic art style when we can have something like traditional art. I understand for stuff like this, it might be a little easier because, as we'll get into with like the story, a lot of this issue relies on like the likeness of certain characters. And I think the photorealism helps connect that. In a way,
I think it does and it doesn't, because you can like it kind of looks like them, but kind of doesn't either. So as opposed to just being like, okay, this is Boba Fett, no, this is Boba Fett, or this is what's his name, the main guy,
Connor. I reread it today. So Connor Freeman. Yeah,
this is Connor, who, spoiler alert, looks kind of like Boba Fett. Like, I don't know. It's done to varying degrees of effectiveness, I think, throughout the 4 issues it is. But yeah, there were more effective comics even in the Star Wars, where it's a comic of the original like first draft of the script or whatever. It's quite different from what we ended up getting in the movies. Kind of employs a similar thing, but there's inks, I think, like, so you still kind of get like the 3-dimensional painterly look, but I don't know, it's like some of this just like it doesn't look finished, or
it almost looks like a wet painting, like a water damaged painting, like not that it's like not dried. I agree. I think the art isn't my favorite, and you can say this of every comic, but I feel like in particular Dark Horse usually has really, really solid art, and even if the art is like garish, like in something like Dark Empire, I think you can still see that artistic quality to it, whereas this is a little bit more muddy because it's really hard to assess like the quality of it when it's so tightly woven with like the tech aspect of it, like the limitations of the software that this artist had at the time, or whatever limitations he's working within. I don't know. I think it just helps. It ages it more than like when I say traditional, I don't exclusively just mean like traditional like pencil to paper, but traditional comic creation, I feel like ages so well because it just depends on the image. The quality of the image never changes, right? The paper might, the quality of the actual like physical copy might, but the image is sort of always going to preserve itself better than I think something like this. It's sort of like the argument for like bad CGI, right? Like it tanks it because that even though that they did the cutting edge at the time, it's always going to age it and date it, versus something like a practical effect might not show its age as bad over time. Some of them do, of course, but
but there's a certain level of charm to it that I think that I don't know, we have no clue what kind of like deadlines or what the squeeze was for this guy who drew this one. And again, like it's serviceable, but I don't know. It's just, it feels very of the era, like you're saying, in the way that a old special practical effect has a certain level of charm to it that like bad CGI doesn't necessarily have. I feel kind of similarly about this. I think digital art, even just from when this came out to today, has like digital painting, especially, has really people have figured out how to do it well. I think better than and there was good stuff coming out back then too. It's been
Mhm.
around for a long time, but we've really kind of come into a stronger era for it, I think, than what existed here. Because I feel like when this came out, like a lot of digital painting was kind of just used for like rough concept art,
Mhm.
mostly. Is at least my exposure to it. And I don't see it too much in comics. Um, me being like the main meat and potatoes for it, as opposed to like a way to color it under inks, perhaps. I don't know, like. Um, but yeah, moving on from just the art, though, it did tell kind of a fun story. It did feel very Star Wars, even though it's not canon anymore. It was a felt kind of like an episode of the Clone Wars or something
Oh yeah,
in
I
that
can
sense.
totally see that.
What do you think about the about its story with?
I actually liked it. I thought it was interesting. I did a little bit of research today, but prior to reading, I went in totally blind. Um, Part of what I like about our channel and the show is I want it to reflect sort of our own comic history, and that's that we're not experts. We haven't like scoured um, vast collections and everything. We're still accumulating knowledge, always accumulating knowledge. So this for me very much feels like when I would just pick up if your library has a story, pick it up and just read it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of story, I did find out that there is like a previous issue or previous trade of stories that this heavily connects to, which I felt while reading the story. I'm like, oh, there must be some extra context.
Mm-hmm.
I was just dumb and I didn't read. Like on the very bottom of the book in the smallest text, it says this story takes place after blank till like today. Um, so, barring any of the sort of confusing aspects of like following a story that is continuing from something else, I feel like it's pretty self-contained
Mm-hmm.
here. I feel like you get the full story of what they're trying to present to you here without that extra reading. And I still haven't done it, and I still feel like it's a solid story. Um, but I liked it. I thought it was cool. I thought it was interesting. Um, I think I think it's fun to experience Star Wars stories sort of standalone. Obviously, like because it's such a vast universe, it's hard to not put it into context or fit, fit the pieces. But I like Star Wars stories that can just be like a story that's isolated, and it doesn't necessarily, you're not reading it to uncover more secrets or mysteries of the larger universe. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to pick this up and hope to find out like some secret hidden information that they didn't tell you in the movies.
Yeah, unless it's a sequel, unless it's tied in with sequels.
Yeah.
We don't need to get into that, but yeah, I agree. It's fun seeing comparing kind of like what they were doing with Boba Fett as a character, kind of in this, the Legends timeline, and compare that to what we're getting that's considered canon now with like the Book of Boba Fett.
Which
Seeing
I think is
similarities, but
overhated.
also like, yeah, I kind of agree. Um, Similarities, but also kind of stark differences that, like, like spoiler alert, big spoiler alert, I guess. Boba Fett in this one has a wife and kid, um, who show up later in like the third or fourth issue, and then which he doesn't have in the show.
Hmm.
But I think that's kind of a cool direction to take him. I kind of wish if we ever do get more Boba Fett, they'll go that route, because I think that's a it's a he has a wife and kid who he's since like become estranged from to protect them or something.
Hmm. and
Um,
I think that like I remember when I was a kid, I wasn't really a prolific like book reader of Star Wars. Like I wasn't. I know there's a lot of sort of famous and infamous series that came out in that era. I more so just like I really liked reading source books or like big sort of tomes of like information where it like collected all the ships or the characters and all this kind of stuff, and there were mentions of him having sort of like this family connection, even back then a little bit. So it's kind of fun to see a little bit more. Like all I've literally seen is essentially the equivalent of like a Wikipedia article about his family and stuff. So it's cool to get an actual story that introduced us to them. I don't know if that's their first appearance.
I don't even remember. It's my first exposure to it too.
Exactly. Our first exposure is a great way to put it. And it's funny because there's an image where like as part of the reveal of him having a family, there's almost like a family picture. And I remember always seeing that as an example, like, you know, like I said, in articles or in other media, and always wondering, you know, where it came from. I always thought that it was an image created for like whatever source book. Because the picture itself is kind of hilarious. I'm sure we'll show it. It's like this family portrait of this woman holding a baby and just Boba Fett in his armor.
You know, that's just what you do.
Like it just
because this was prior to the lore of like Mandalorians don't remove their helmet, right? Like, didn't that come from the show?
Yeah, the whole
and then the show even exposes that's like a kind of a weird like sect of Mandalorians that abide by that.
They're kind of in their own sort of section. It's been funny because like obviously Boba Fett introduced the world to like Mandalorians, you know. It was just an aside of like, here's this cool looking guy, he has this cool armor, and then of course your imagination runs wild, and so people started to develop like, well, what's the story behind that armor? It's even funny now that Boba Fett is not a Mandalorian by, you know, technical definition, that he started it all. But the history of Mandalorians and stuff has shifted a lot over the years, both in the Legends timeline and the canon timeline. So it is, you're right. I think it's kind of interesting seeing this different take on sort of an older viewpoint of like Mandalorians and having Boba Fett be more connected to sort of a Mandalorian heritage. I know that they do a little bit in like Book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian, you know, like there's a whole idea that Jango is like this an adoptive son of Mandalore, and that's true in Legends as well. But yeah, it's different. The show introduced a lot of new stuff when it comes to like Mandalorian behaviors and all that kind of stuff. Boba Fett definitely does not follow the rule of do not remove the helmet in this.
Yeah,
he do be taking it off quite a bit.
he do be never mind. I thought I would get there. Didn't get there. And just fun moments of like he's in the bar and he's like they're like 3 cheers to like Boba Fett and no one says anything. He's like, drinks on me. Okay, cheers to Boba Fett. You know, like there's fun bits throughout it that feel very Star Warsy and just kind of, you know, what you want to see, like fun stuff.
Just like a fun little contained adventure. I guess just like a really quick synopsis of what happens. We immediately jump in and we're told through sort of a news report, which I always
which is funny that like Boba, a notorious criminal dying is, or even if he would be like notorious galaxy wide, like that's on the news.
Yeah,
all that. This just in, Hitman dead.
Yeah, Dog the Bounty Hunter killed.
That would be news. That would be tragic.
Yeah. R.I.P. Maybe one day. I don't know. I don't even know if he's alive or not.
He's still out there repossessing poor people's cars.
Yeah, dogging and hunting. The news aspect of Star Wars has always been fascinating to me and always really weird, but it actually plays a big role in this, just from a point of like bringing exposition and information. But we essentially find out Boba Fett is killed over a news report, and Connor Freeman, who is our main character, sees this. We are told that he is the son of a clone trooper, and he runs this bar, and he has some history. Turns out that there was this hit squad, presumably killed Boba Fett, and since this has happened, the members of that hit squad have been themselves being taken out. We're led to believe throughout the story that it is Connor doing some sort of revenge killings. But surprise to no one, spoilers ahead,
Boba Fett is not dead.
Boba Fett is not dead. Who would have thought? I mean, he hasn't been dead since ever.
Boba Fett did not die.
Like I will always choose to believe that if like Return of the Jedi was made today, there would have been an end credit scene of Boba Fett doing the whole like out of the Sarlacc. Yeah. Like it was always a foregone conclusion that he was never fully dead. Mm-hmm. But he's not dead, and instead he is taking his own revenge against this hit squad, trying to find out who put the call in, and he's essentially using Connor as like a front because they are of a similar facial structure, seen as they are both clones or genetically connected to their host of Jango Fett. And then in doing so, we go on an adventure in which Connor is conscripted by Jango to help him protect his family, because this is not just a plot to kill Boba Fett. This is a plot to kill Boba Fett's secret family that he has. And all kind of coalesces in this sort of weird family adventure by the end. When I was reading, I definitely got that theme of like the father and the son. There's many different connection points of that relationship. Obviously, you have Jango and Boba Fett. You have Connor and presumably his clone father. And then who we find out, we come to find the villain of our story is a grieving father whose son was killed by Boba Fett because he did some bad things. I thought that was kind of a fun sort of relationship to explore. As I mentioned at the top, this is a continuation of another story, and Connor and his story is told in that issue. We get a little bit of it here, essentially finding out that Jango killed Connor's father, but then felt bad for him and provided for him, and then later on down the line, when Boba met him, he saved his life. So there's a history between these characters for some time before we get to this point. But yeah, I thought that was like a fun theme, fathers and sons.
Yeah, kind of complicated by the fact that he has a weird romance subplot with Boba Fett's wife.
There is that. I thought that was very weird.
Yeah, that felt a little. Yeah, odd.
I think it's funny that we live in a world in which people will claim because of the Book of Boba Fett that Disney turned Boba into some kind of like cuck, but they were doing it in 2012 or 2012.
He literally gets cucked.
Like there's literally, I do like that part when there's a part when Boba talks to Connor and goes, you kissed my wife.
Yeah. She's not your wife anymore or something.
Like
that's my wife, buddy.
Yeah, she's mine now. No, she kicked out both of them. Yeah, no, I thought that was kind of funny. This is a small little tangent, but when I was writing my thoughts about like the father and son relationship, had we done this in person, I was workshopping a bit where I was going to be like talking about the fathers and then be like, and your dad doesn't love you or something, like try to sneak in some, but I couldn't get it to work. Couldn't get the brainstorming to fire. But yeah, I think there's some fun stuff with the story and that relationship between, Fett, Connor, this sort of grieving governor, who's on this like vendetta, and then obviously Fett's family. I think once you get to Fett's family, there's a lot more fun to the comic.
It definitely kind of picks up after that point. Yeah, I would say it goes like this. The first issue is a little like, what? But it gets better.
It definitely plays heavily into that, like, Boba Fett has just been one of those guys that like got so much credit for doing literally nothing on screen. Like so much of our love for that character, or even like the pop culture relevance of that character, is like presumed. You know, obviously there are stories that have fleshed him out since then, but I don't know. It's just kind of funny because this comic definitely treats him like he is the ultimate. Like there's no one better than Boba Fett, to the point where like, yeah, his death is intergalactic news.
Yeah.
But,
we got him.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we got him. But it's just it is a weird story. Like I can't say that this is like one of the best things I've ever read. Certainly not one of my favorite Star Wars stories I've ever read. I don't know how I would rank it in terms of Boba Fett stories. Because this might be sacrilege, but I think Boba Fett is a cool character, but I have never been like one to swoon over him, and like just I'm not like looking to gobble up every Boba Fett thing that's out there, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like, he's a cool character, and there's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun stuff for him, but he is definitely just one of those guys that, like, he looked cool, and then people ran with it and like invented all this stuff for him that then kind of looped back in to become, you know, canon, or eventually get put into Legends like this was, and then recanonized in a different way. Like, I don't know. He's cool, but yeah, I'm not sitting there like thinking he's got to be just number one cool kick-ass guy. Otherwise, like, you ruin Star Wars, you know?
Yeah, I know. Like, I think he's in this story. I think he's fine. I think he has some really great moments. I think he has an incredible amount of plot armor. Obviously, like you kind of have to, because the story says it takes place a year before A New Hope, which is really weird to me. Like, obviously he's gonna have plot armor, but it's almost so like flagrant. And we're like, I don't know. There's this whole plot within the story about like how he fakes his death, or how he, you know, gets out of his bind, and like it just is very,
it's like contrived. Yeah, it's just like, it's pretty goofy.
Well, it's like he's hunting a guy, but he knows there's people after him. So he's like, whatever, of course there's people after me. And he finds this guy, and right when he finds this guy is when he gets jumped by the hit squad. So he gets, like, the story even says like, oh, it's pretty lucky that a guy looked like you know, was in the hole that you were right when you got attacked. And he essentially, like, that guy gets killed by the pursuers, and Boba Fett in seemingly like 30 seconds is able to remove his entire suit of armor and his bodysuit, and dress a dead body, and then send the dead body up in his place to get blasted into smithereens, and you know, take the place of his corpse. And it just felt very like, what?
Yeah, pretty implausible.
Well, it almost felt like it wasn't fully realized. Like the inciting incident itself is cool enough, I think, of like, he got attacked by this hit squad, that's enough. Obviously we want to know how he gets out of it, or how he, you know, escapes death, but doing it in this way felt very uncool. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think it was just kind of, I'm sure they had like beats they wanted to hit in the story, but they're like, I don't know, figure out how this happens, figure out how this, you know, like, yeah. I mean, it works to a point, because if they're telling the book on like, hey, Boba Fett is dead, and we're like, well, shit, what happened to Boba Fett? You know?
Yeah, my Boba, I need to find out what happened to him. Is he okay?
So, worked on us, you know, 15 years after it was published or whatever. So
I did pick it up because it said Boba Fett is dead, even though I knew
he wasn't.
Not.
Well, yeah, and it's, you read the first one, and yeah, the whole thing with Boba Fett's dead, and then one of the people on the hit squad gets confronted by some cloaked figure on his home planet. It's like, who could that be?
Yeah.
Who is this?
Is it the guy that's still in the bar?
Yeah.
Who hasn't left? Yeah, there's a lot of like, when I think about like a character proving, you know, how cool they are, that proving that X factor, you know, obviously sometimes it is just like just their personality, or just their To use a common phrase now, like their whole aura that they have, like what they're presenting just visually or as a character. I like it more when they can like sort of put action behind that and like showcase that they're cool because they have it, you know, they have a certain set of skills and all such. Like there are parts in this comic that utilize Boba Fett's skills really well and showcase like he's a really he's a good combative and he's tactical and he's strategic. The part like where he fakes his death, no, I don't. That seems all luck and no skill, and obviously like part of it is luck and part of it is plot armor and situation just happening. But like there's a part in the book where Boba uses an Imperial disguise to go find another one of his attackers, and he comes in on a shuttle. The shuttle doesn't have the codes. He essentially damages the ship, so then he can claim that it was ambushed, and that essentially gets him in the door enough to then he crashes that ship into the tower that was communicating with him, and he's able to sneak into this base. See that like that feels very much like within like, yeah, that's a cool thing. Like he's doing this action hero kind of stuff that showcases his skill. Like he's putting his skill behind his, you know, sort of legendary status. Or even there's that part, continue on that, of he confronts one of the attackers in this sort of training room with all these stormtroopers, and they're like, "Oh, you're dumb for walking in here. You know, you thought you could take all of us." And he's like, "Well, I'm not the one standing in front of like a literal armory of grenades." And then he shoots it and blows it up. Like that part is great. I actually really like that part because that feels very my version of what I think Boba Fett would do, of read the room, sense how can he take on this, you know, situation, and then outsmart people, right? You know, like it's not like him just fighting an entire room of guys for no reason, you know, and coming out on top. I don't know. I feel like this comic had a lot of back and forth on showcasing characters as like really capable, but also just having them be like incredibly lucky. And like the story essentially like bending around them to you know, like
to
you
make
said,
those things that need to happen. Yeah, which I think from a plotting and like narrative perspective is a fault of it, I think, just because makes for just a less satisfying read. Because what you want to see is people like you want people to be in difficult situations, but yeah, it's what you said, you want to see them outsmart and make it work, not just like somehow be fine, you know.
Another thing I thought was kind of interesting about this is like I think it's a cool concept of what happens to the clones past the war. I think that's always been interesting. I think canon has done a really good job of showcasing that now, and following, you know, we got so many more actual characters in the clones now because of stuff like the Clone Wars and Bad Batch and everything. This was like a fun take on that, but I feel like they didn't really, I feel like they could have spent more time addressing it in a way that would have been really interesting. Like I feel like it was missing that aspect. You know, the comic concludes on this really fun moment between Connor and Boba Fett where they're talking about Boba Fett's daughter, and Connor says she has our eyes. And I think that like that was a really cool moment. I really like that because it, you know, is drawing attention to the fact that like they don't only look the same, like they are genetically connected. And I don't know, I think that would have been cool to delve into that more of like, we don't get a lot, and I know this is purposeful, like it's to keep that mysterious aspect to Boba Fett, but like I'd like to know what Boba Fett thinks about having, you know, thousands of brothers out there.
Like millions probably.
You know, like, and I know that he doesn't consider them that, you know, he separates him from that. You know, he is by all means the son of Jango Fett, and he's more linked to that than he is to like the clones. But I don't know, I think that there could have been more opportunities to discuss some of those things. I don't, and maybe that's something that happened in the previous series and I'm missing out. But we're assessing this comic based on what it is contained from front to back cover exclusively.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, overall a fun entry into the Boba Fett Legends, you know, lore, um, with some issues here and there too. Would be kind of my final thoughts on that. I'd be interested to see what other Boba Fett's comics exist out there, because I'm sure there's even a lot of funky stuff from like prequel era too that could be cool to check out. Like,
yeah, early Marvel comic type stuff, and that stuff's always so fascinating to me. I have like a fascination with like a prequel world of what they thought that era was like, and everything. Obviously, I love the prequels. I grew up with them, and that's like one of my favorite timelines in Star Wars. But it's just kind of fun to see how people were created back then. And also the Legends timeline, as much as everyone loves to say it's much better, it's a mess. It's convoluted. I read recently that they were actually going to reboot it prior to Disney even acquiring Lucasfilm. Like, because like even for example, if you were to find out how the Death Star plans were stolen, you'd have like 5 different stories. Because some people do it and they do that story in a game. Like, it's an exciting story. You want to retell it essentially, and everyone wants their hands on that. And I think this showcases, even just in a small way, that like that era, canon has plenty of issues now too, but this era was very kind of convoluted and confusing.
Yeah, and like I can understand if I was a fan of something that, like, if that slate just got wiped clean, I would be a little upset about it. But in the same breath, yeah, you don't have to pretend that it was something it wasn't. Like it was this untouchable, like, chart of like super consistent canon start to finish. Like, of course not. But, and we're running into the same problems now that it's been going on for 10 plus however many years.
Yeah, I'm trying to maintain that sort of cohesive continuity is always tough. But I mean, like, the thing is it's 2026, and I walked into a comic shop and I picked this up, and I wasn't arrested. I wasn't, or persecuted, or killed, or told that I'm lame, because as surprising it is to some of these people, these books still exist. These comics still exist. These stories are still here. The characters are still here. You can still there's a wealth of information, both old and new. You can still enjoy this stuff. And even though this wasn't maybe my favorite Dark Horse I've ever read, I think in all honesty, there's a reason why Dark Horse ended up like losing the license. I know that Marvel was sort of a baked in thing, like with the Disney acquisition. Like, of course they were going to take the titles back. And I think they've done some really good stuff since then. But like, this is 2 years out from the conclusion of Dark Horse running Star Wars. And I feel like that the quality of this is indicative of that. Not that they were always firing on all cylinders, but like, this isn't the best that they had to offer.
Well, there's times that they were, for sure. Yeah. Like, there's, especially around like early 2000s, a lot of that stuff rules, and we should do
the Republic
discussions on that
/ Empire stuff is some of my absolute favorite stuff I've ever read. And that's where I got started with a lot of my comic reading, just in general, was Dark Horse Star Wars. So by no means is this a bad story. You can still enjoy these old stories. You can still kind of find some use for them as entertainment. And I had fun with this, and I'm glad that we got a chance to talk about it. Even though it wasn't like the most mind-blowing thing ever. We knew we just wanted to do something for Star Wars Day, and this was like an easy kind of fun thing to do. And we'd planned
in line with the kind of like theme of the channel of just like finding new stuff and chatting about that.
And we wanted to cover something kind of Mandalorian tied, since the new movie is coming out, and we're very excited for that. We definitely plan on doing a movie review / discussion once that has come out. That I'm excited to hear your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. It'll be nice to have Star Wars in theaters again.
Absolutely. It's been too long, and the taste of my mouth that from the last one that we got is barely being washed out. So I'm ready for some palate cleansing to come in the form of the Mandalorian and Grogu, which I've always loved. I've loved that show. I've loved all seasons of it, even, which is surprising to hear to some.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with it, because I think hopefully they tie it into some of the kind of like breadcrumbs they've been dropping throughout the show of like, you know, what's going on with all these like secret empire projects and stuff. So presumably that's the direction they're heading, which will be fun to see.
Yeah, so I'm all for it. I honestly, at least currently, one of my favorite eras of Star Wars is that time between 6 and 7. Like I always like the idea of like, you know, these Imperial remnants and the New Republic, and I don't think I've never been one of the people that like gets discouraged from investing in a story even though you know where it ends, because they always say it's the journey, not the destination. You know, like you can still enjoy something even if you maybe you're not excited about where it concludes, you know.
Well, and that's a goofy way to look at it, because like barring, you know, that certain characters don't die, like there's a lot of story to be told still, you know, like it's not a foregone conclusion that like there are plenty of successful examples of things taking place like between that tell really engaging and entertaining stories, so there's lots of room there.
This is sort of just connected to that, but off to the side. The new show Maul Shadowlord has been coming out. It's been incredible, like absolutely great. I've been loving it, and it was funny because there are some characters that are going to appear that have first premiered in other things, and in doing so, we've seen like essentially the conclusion to their story. And I saw a post essentially being like, "How am I supposed to get invested in these characters where I know where they go?" And I'm like, brother, A, you're watching a show about Darth Maul.
We know what happens. We've known.
We know what happens to him, and B, we thought he was dead in '99. You know, you
Darth
don't know
Maul
what's going to happen. And then also, this is a series in which the very first movie has this guy. I don't know if you know him. His name is Obi-Wan Kenobi. He dies in that movie. How am I supposed to get invested in the story of Obi-Wan Kenobi when I know where he dies? How about this crazy trilogy and this incredible animated TV show?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's goofy to know that a character lives. Like,
yeah. Well, it's the same people who are like, oh, you know, this show ran for 9 seasons. I like 1 through 8 of those seasons are good, but I don't like how the show ended. Therefore, the entire show is garbage. It's like, no, that's not the case. Don't be so definitive.
And if you think about that through like a creator standpoint too, it's like they're not sitting there, they're not trying to get to the last episode. You know, like hopefully you want shows to go out on a high note, but like Game of Thrones seems to be a good example of like people fucking hate that last season, and like to them that was just enough to ruin the whole thing. It's like you still got whatever 5 solid seasons of like premier fantasy TV. Like that's not nothing.
Yeah, you know? I watched the show. I wasn't ecstatic about the conclusion, but honestly, I didn't hate the show, you know, because of that. Like I'm like, oh, that sucks, and it, you know, obviously it takes away that sort of the energy, you know, sort of that momentum that you had. But like, I still think back on some of my favorite parts from that show, and they're not. My enjoyment of it hasn't been lessened because of the conclusion of the show. Like I still got to experience those stories and those characters in a way that I enjoyed.
Yeah, well, I mean, and looping it back into Star Wars, I mean, we've had lengthy discussions about how let down we were by episode 9. And again, like we don't need to rehash that, but like that doesn't mean that I'm writing off the rest of the movies. Like,
no, I've always been considered a Star Wars apologist, and just because I dislike episode 9, I still really love episode 7. I really love episode 8. I've loved literally everything else that's come out of Star Wars in the Disney era. Like, you know, some things you like more than others, but like other than that, that's the only thing. And that doesn't diminish me not liking the conclusion to the Skywalker saga does not make me dislike the Skywalker saga as a whole, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because the way I treat it is you are an individual, and in your head, you can pick and choose what things you like and don't like. And to me, my experience of Star Wars, sometimes I don't really care, canon or not canon. I'm just like, oh, that's cool. That's a cool Star Wars thing. I like that.
Well, it's fun. It's fun, honestly, with Legends, like kind of having like it's almost like a what if, like, yeah, they're not going to loop Mara Jade into anything, but you still have all of that stuff, and it's fun to like have kind of an alternate version that is still like, while not technically considered canon, it's not fan fiction either. Like it's an established like kind of storyline that you can still engage with, like.
Yeah, it's just the same as any other, there are weird outlying stuff that doesn't fit, and there's other stuff that you could totally just slot right in and enjoy. And in the case of like Mara Jade, guys, I don't know what to tell you. If Mara Jade came out today, you would hate her.
Mm-hmm.
You would hate her because she has red hair and a purple lightsaber, and she emasculates Luke Skywalker. You would absolutely hate her.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't shed any tears for her not being around, because you wouldn't like her. That's you just miss what you don't have anymore, ultimately.
Yeah, no one likes to complain about Star Wars more than Star Wars fans.
Yes, I know. So on this channel, we're Star Wars fans. We can be open about things we dislike, but we're not going to like. If you like The Rise of Skywalker,
I wish I did.
Good for you.
I really wish I did, and I've tried so many times. I've watched that movie many times trying to enjoy it. I just have a hard time.
And that just means, there's such a wealth of stuff out there that you can go and enjoy the stuff that you like. I've always attributed my love of Star Wars to Star Wars is like an album, right? Some albums you listen front to back, every song is important. Some albums, there's a couple ones that you skip. There's a couple songs you skip. There's a couple ones you go straight for. No one has ever said, oh, because I like 14 out of the 15 songs on this album, that the album is garbage.
Mm-hmm.
It is just a personal preference thing, and just find what you like, find others who like what you like, and have these discussions. If you read this and you have some thoughts that you'd like to share with us, or any memories or feelings or hot takes or anything,
more about the Bloodlines saga.
Yeah, I mean,
before
some of the things I said or I saw, said that more people like the previous Blood Ties than this one. I think that just has a factor of like it has Jango Fett in it, which I've always liked Jango Fett more than Boba Fett. But yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on Star Wars Blood Ties, Boba Fett is Dead, and any other Boba Fett thoughts or Star Wars thoughts that you may have. This will not be the first and last time that we talk about Star Wars on the channel.
Yeah, we've got a few. I know we want to talk about the more like the Dark Horse stuff that we're more familiar with. There's a lot of really cool Marvel stuff, like what is it, Professor Astra?
Doc Afra.
Dr. Afra.
I love that. Yeah, I'm not caught up, or I actually got really behind. But the first sort of they rebooted it essentially like as a way to tie it into like, here's the pre-A New Hope era, here's the Empire Strikes Back era, and here's the Return of the Jedi era. I've only read, essentially the New Hope era up to like the Empire Strikes Back era, but I love that character, and that's a character I would love to see.
Which is like from comics, which is really, really cool. I think that'd be a cool thing to talk about down the line too, of just kind of a retrospective on that stuff, because there's a wealth of Star Wars comics history that we like to talk about over the course of this channel. So
yeah, if there's any specific recommendations of things that people would really like to hear us talk about, please let us know. Doc Afra is a great one to discuss in the future, because I like Star Wars when it gets weird, and that is a weird series. I can assure you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, any final thoughts, Davis? on either Star Wars or Blood Ties? Boba Fett is dead.
I mean, Star Wars in general, I'll always love it, even though it's hurt me before.
Keep coming back.
Yeah. Boba Fett is dead. I thought was, I mean, worth a read. It was fun, and again, kind of a cool glimpse into what they were doing with Boba Fett before they, reset the canon. Mixed bag, not bad. Worth a read. If you find it, I think worth checking out. But
yeah, I think it was worth a pickup. I'm glad that I'm not disappointed in spending money on it. Mm-hmm. There was one bit I meant to mention earlier. There's this like stormtrooper commander in this that's like cartoonishly evil, like
the one in the like blue commander armor.
Yeah, there's just that bit when he's like, "All right, guys, time to go kill some more natives." I'm like, what?
Yeah,
cartoonishly evil. That's so silly. Yeah, like I know that they're.
I'm gonna go hunting.
Yeah,
for people.
I meant to mention that earlier, but I did think that was kind of a funny bit. But
yeah,
the whole comic is full of stuff like that, where it's just like, what? Okay, move on. That's funny, I guess. And there's some stuff to enjoy. The art is weird. I don't know if I like it or not, but I've definitely seen worse from more recent comics.
Yeah, and again, I don't want it to sound like we're being overly critical of it, because like, if I don't know if that was like, how much of that was a choice, how much of that was dictated, like this is what we want you to emulate, or
we want a digital art, digital photograph art style comic.
Yeah, like just, it's not my favorite, but props to him for making it happen and finishing a comic.
Like you did it, you made something, and we get to hold it in our hands and enjoy it. And like I said about the art, I think it's strange, but I think you get invested enough in the story by the end that you kind of stop thinking about it too much. At least that's how by the time I got halfway through, I was like more invested in the story, and I was enjoying where it was going. And I actually think it's pretty well written. There's only a couple clunky lines, but I mean, Star Wars is like clunky line central. It's just hard. It's a tripping hazard, you're kind of unable to avoid.
Yeah.
Go ahead and toss your station to pick up some power converters. Like,
I love those deleted scenes that you see where they're like, the actors are like tripping on the lines because they're like, no one talks like this.
Yeah, all the crazy jargon and everything. Yeah.
Well, that's fun. The comic I mentioned before, like the Star Wars, has some of that in there, and it's just like, this was the right move to remove this.
Yeah. Declutter it a little bit. Hey, I love you, George Lucas. George Lucas created the world that we're living in. He deserves our utmost respect. We can't all be winning writers. All right. Sometimes the idea is enough to sell it. And that's the important thing. Because at the end of the day, he's got a couple billion more than either of us do. And he's sitting pretty, and he's living life. So
he's Georging it up.
Yeah, George Lucasing it up. If only we could be so lucky. So, no, I think it was fun. I know this was kind of more of a casual discussion, but yeah, we just wanted to jump in on the Star Wars fun and hope to do more in the future.
Yep. Well, thanks for watching us talk about Star Wars Blood Ties. Boba Fett is dead. Let us know if you've read it before, what your thoughts on it, or any other picks you think we should pick up. Drop a like, drop a comment, drop a subscribe if you feel so inclined. Helps us out. So, thank you.
May the Force be with you.